Welcome to the Guest Show on Radio Kuwait. This show features women and men who have made a difference to Kuwait with their work and their life journeys. The show is scripted and presented by Chaitali B. Roy and directed by Anis Bakar. Welcome to the Guest Show. Today we have with us Dr. Fejer Al-Majid. Dr. Fejer and I met through Nada Faris. Was it Nada Faris who brought us together? Because I asked Nada, who's a dear friend of mine and one of our former guests on the Guest Show, I said, Nada, I really want to do an episode on mental health, and this is something very close to my heart. And then she mentioned Dr. Fejer, and I got in touch with her. It's been some time. It's taken us some time, almost 2 months, right?
Yeah.
But we've made it, and we are in this beautiful place. It's almost unbelievable, frankly speaking, because we came to Watania Market, myself and Anis, and we made our way to the 5th floor. And it's magical, the 5th floor. You have the open sky, and then you have these this very large space, and this beautiful clinic over here, which is a therapy center. It's called the New Dawn Therapy Center. Why is it New Dawn, Dr. Fejer? Welcome to the Guest Show, and tell us about New Dawn Therapy.
Thank you for having me, Chaitali. It's a very special story. It's close to my heart. It comes from the quote, "It is never too late to start over each morning." I was going through a really rough time, and when I read that quote, I had hope.
Okay.
Every day there is a new dawn therapy.
Okay. And what got you interested in mental health, doctor?
It wasn't planned.
Okay.
As a doctor,
just happened.
It just happened.
And how did that happen?
Well, I think I had a close experience with mental health, and some people in my family, much extended family, went through some stuff, and it really made me think that it's so powerful. Mental health issues can have you in a very vulnerable, very difficult state. It can stop your whole life. It can make people either come closer or further away. It can lose your relationships. It can lose your job. For something so powerful, I felt like I had to be involved and help in whatever way I could.
Okay. You know what? Even now, in this age and time, I still have a lot of people, when I talk to them about mental health, they say, why is it so important? And they say that, if you're not feeling well, just get on with life. And maybe you're having a bad day. Tomorrow it will be a better day. But there is no way you can explain to these certain individuals that mental health is not as easy as that. You cannot brush it aside so easily. That it's not a flu which kind of goes away in a couple of days' time. Sometimes it takes years and years to actually come to terms with, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I think it's the methods that we use as well,
and
the beliefs we have about mental health that maybe stop us getting better sooner.
So we're going to talk more about that. Dr. Fejer, you specialized in psychiatry, and you said that you'd give us the reason for that, the inspiration for that, and you finished your education some of the most noted universities in the United Kingdom. Where did you study?
Well, I studied psychotherapy after medicine, not
Okay.
psychiatry.
You studied psychotherapy.
Yeah,
yes.
I did a PhD in psychotherapy. I did my medical degree at Aberdeen University,
Yeah.
worked for 4 years here, and then did my 5-year PhD at Edinburgh University. It's a clinical
Both in
doctor.
Scotland. They are both amazing universities.
Oh, it's amazing.
In their own right, and Scotland is such a beautiful place, right?
It's beautiful.
Yes. So how do you look back at that experience? How long were you there?
Oh, I think total of 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah, but not, consecutive. But Scotland is just magical.
So are the people.
Yes, I love them so much.
Yes.
They have a sense of humor. They're very down to earth, very friendly.
And it is so beautiful.
It is.
You just every nook and corner, there's something beautiful tucked away, right? I love the Mile, but the Mile is actually the most touristic place, I suppose, right?
Oh, you've been to Edinburgh?
Yeah, quite a few
That's
times.
amazing.
So, and I'm hoping that my daughter, when she goes to study, I'll be able to send her to Scotland, because it's so
Yeah.
The people are beautiful. The culture is so beautiful. So how when you came back to Kuwait after 11 years, was it
Yeah.
difficult?
It was a little difficult. And I
Okay.
think I love Kuwait. I think it's a wonderful place and
Mm-hmm.
it's my home. But I think it's a difficult transition when you're used to being in a university setting to sort of entering the workforce. Because university settings are full of new ideas all the time, people coming in. It's very challenging. You learn from everyone you meet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as a creative entrepreneur and a therapist, it's a bit more tough because you're a bit of a lone worker sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're a lone worker, you miss that kind of, shall we say, colleague relationship.
Why did you choose to go alone, in the sense that why didn't you join a government?
Well, there was the option.
Yeah.
And I also joined a private therapy center before
Okay.
I came here and I worked at a university. I think for me, what I really wanted was the creative freedom. I wanted to offer people options, different options in mental health
Okay.
than what's regularly prescribed. I'm not against CBT. I think it's fantastic. But sometimes I think that the options for mental health approaches in Kuwait can be perhaps in specific fields, and I wanted to be able to introduce new ideas
I think that is very common, just not in Kuwait but elsewhere as
everywhere.
well, right?
Yeah,
The CBT stands for cognitive
behavioral therapy, very effective, but not
what
always.
what does that mean? If I were to
It
ask
works
you.
on your ideas, thoughts, behaviors, and actions.
Okay.
I'm not trained in CBT. I enjoy working with the ideas, but I'm not trained in CBT. It's something I think is useful, but I very much value the exploration, looking at people's patterns, their histories, their families, what's really under the problem. CBT, I believe, works for a lot of conditions, but our approach here is quite different.
I really thought, and this is something that I've learned today, that anybody who studies therapy or psychotherapy does CBT.
No.
Oh, so
No.
okay, so you can choose. You're given a choice.
Well, the program I did was interpersonal dialogue, and it didn't do CBT at all. We worked with person-centered psychodynamic therapy, a sort of interplay between the two, and it was amazing. It was a very good program, and both therapies are different. There is a bit of an overlap now, as recent researchers are showing, but they focus on the person.
The personal story, the individual story.
The person-centered one focuses on the person as an individual.
Okay.
And its main premise is that if this person, very much like the potato that Carl Rogers talks about, if you put it in the soil, give it the right environment, the right sunlight, temperature, nutrients, it'll grow with a sort of understanding of where to go that's good for them.
Okay.
Self-actualization.
I see.
That's one of the basic premises of person-centered therapy. Now, with psychodynamic therapy, let me know, Chaitali, if I keep going on, because I'm very passionate about this.
I'm very interested in knowing more, yeah.
Psychodynamic psychotherapy started with Freud, and it very much works with ideas and patterns and family history. It works with dynamic patterns within the person and within their environment.
I see. Is it right to say, Dr. Fejer, that a lot of mental history has to do with the genes?
That's a very good question. What I know is that mental health, you do get, for example, families who have these mental health conditions. However, according to my knowledge, there is no specific gene yet mentioned that is mental health related,
Okay.
according to my knowledge at this time, But some mental health issues are, there are noticeable patterns in some families, but as yet to the gene.
It's not been identified yet.
It's not been identified.
Yeah,
according to my knowledge.
Okay, there is a noticeable pattern. So just to be clear, what is the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist?
Another good question. Some psychiatrists practice psychotherapy. However, the psychotherapy we practice perhaps more intense. It's not perhaps. It's definitely more intensive. 50 minutes. Psychiatrists deal with disease structures. They deal with medication. They deal with identifying and diagnosing. Psychiatry is also moving in a more holistic direction as well, to be fair. But psychotherapy, we really sit with the person for 50 minutes, and it's sort of more intense focus and understanding where that person is coming from, who they are, what their surroundings are. So we work with psychiatrists, actually. We have referrals going both ways, and we cannot do without them sometimes.
Yeah, so you're like, it's like a symbiotic relationship.
It's a close relationship, yes.
Yeah, okay. So your profile mentions meaning-making narratives in mental health illness and how this was seen from a cultural lens.
Yes.
Found it very, very interesting. What does this mean?
I think it's interesting that we construct narratives that mean something to us. If we make meaning out of something, we make meaning out of a story, it helps us get better.
Okay.
Sometimes,
what do you mean, if you can give an example?
For example, my thesis was about incoherence.
Okay.
It's about people with mental health issues, specifically psychosis from bipolar. What happens is that when these people are told their story is meaningless, that it was just sickness, nothing's wrong, you're just sick. This made it more difficult for them to recover because they couldn't make a story out of it. They couldn't make sense of the experiences. We human beings, we like to have meaning. We like to make stories that make sense to us. This happened to me because of this, and I feel this, therefore this.
So you mean to say when a person is going through an episode like that, you shouldn't just dismiss it as sickness, but you should try to analyze it?
I wouldn't say analyze it. I would say be open to the meanings and interpretations that person has of their experience.
Yeah.
I think too often we try to pathologize or make something clinical.
Okay.
I'm not going to lie, it can be clinical, and obviously psychosis is not an easy thing. It needs to be handled with care. But if we just dismiss people, you're sick.
Okay, what is psychosis?
The psychosis is an experience of delusions and hallucinations. It's when I'm talking from psychiatry, right?
Yeah.
Because people in different cultures view this episode of madness, shall we say, quote unquote, as an experience in different ways. However, medically, Western medical practice classifies it as psychosis when you see and hear things that aren't there, if you have beliefs that aren't yours, intrusive thoughts, things like that. That's when you know a patient is psychotic. However, this can also I want to say this because it's something that I really believe, it can be seen by other cultures, perhaps more indigenous tribes, as a spiritual awakening. It can be seen as a breakthrough. Yes. The symbols, the ideas that you see when you're psychotic could be telling you something about yourself. And you go into Carl Jung here.
That's right. You know, I've seen that in some tribes and villages of India, when they feel that they're having this almost spiritual experience, and they're somehow connecting with God, and then they go into this kind of a frenzy. And I suppose perhaps that could explain one of the reasons, like perhaps that person was having an episode, it could be that, right?
Because you're giving meaning. That's not making someone weak.
That's right.
In tribes, there's this documentary called Crazy Wise by Phil Boards, and he went to study indigenous tribes and how they dealt with episodes or madness and things like that, and he found that people recovered and did not have as many hospital admissions because when they had those episodes, they were enveloped by the tribes. They were told they had a gift. They were told that they were special, and they were taught how to handle it.
How interesting.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, and so they accepted it, right?
This was a
they
gift
moved
to
past.
them. Yeah, this was a gift, and they learned to handle the voices and everything. They were told that they were special.
I see.
Yeah.
What would you say is madness, Dr.
That's
Fejer?
a very good question. It's a very good question. I would say we're all a little bit mad.
I agree with you.
I'd say that.
Anis is going to attest to it.
Yes,
Chaitali
we
is
all have our
definitely-
inner madness, I
Yes.
think, and I believe that if we all have a trigger.
Yeah, we
All
have
of
a
us.
trigger.
It just has to have a specific situation, perhaps a predisposition, but we all have it. So that should make us more compassionate towards people who do go through very difficult times. I'd say it's a problem when it really impacts your quality of life.
Okay.
When I don't want to say you're mad because you hear voices, or you're mad because you see things, because we have people who do live with these things quite peacefully. I'm saying, obviously, get it checked. I'm not going to generally say that, but I'm just saying that there are hearing voices communities. There's a hearing voices network.
Really?
Yes.
Oh,
It
that's
was
interesting.
discovered more than 20 years ago. Not discovered, it was created more than 20 years ago in Holland.
Okay.
And they really work with voice hearers.
Okay, so
They're
they
taught to
listen
live peacefully with their voices.
I
Yes.
see. Okay.
So there are ways that we can deal with it. And this is what I'm passionate about, that don't necessarily mean kill it.
Okay.
Because sometimes it doesn't work. What are
Okay.
people supposed to do?
Okay. Hearing voices, could it also be termed as, I don't know whether it has any connection with being psychic?
This
No.
is a very good thing that you're saying, because I'm very interested in this actually, and I'm reading a lot about it. You know, there's this thing called transpersonal psychotherapy
Okay.
and transpersonal psychology. It's where you attach psychotherapy and knowledge to perhaps a more spiritual dimension, that there is a bigger consciousness or power, and they use a lot of ideas like that. And there's also, for example, when you do that, you also have to be aware of which culture
Okay.
you're discussing it, because some cultures do talk.
Yeah.
Some cultures have associations. You know, you've got different religions. They,
Mhm.
you know, they believe in different things without going into specifics. So I think it's important to look at the bigger picture before you classify someone as unwell.
Okay. So you also mentioned that the therapeutic relationship is the biggest catalyst for change.
Yes.
That it's the relationship that a patient forms with his or her therapist.
Yes.
Is it that you're talking about, or does it
Yes.
apply to any close relationship the patient is able to?
Well, of course, it does
Okay.
require to any relationship. There's this idea of witnessing, of being witnessed, of having your pain seen and felt and heard.
Okay.
That's why we find it so therapeutic
Okay.
to read books, hear stories, talk to a close friend. But therapy, however, uses specific techniques, theories, and ideas and approaches that would not be a good idea or not ethical to use in other relationships. And that's why therapy can be very effective.
So you mean to say that, therefore, the relationship that a person who's suffering forms with his therapist is a very important relationship.
Of course, it's
Yeah.
essential.
It's essential.
It's essential. It's much more, it's different than a friendship relationship.
Okay.
And this is why I get annoyed when people say fadfada, which means I'm just talking.
Okay.
Just talk to your therapist.
Right?
It's like,
I mean,
no.
this is something that I've also faced. Like, for example, if someone is having a mental health challenge, I say, I think, why don't you seek therapy? I mean, what would a therapist do? He or she would talk to me, right? So why can't I find somebody in my family to talk to me, or a friend to talk to me? What's the difference? How do you explain to these people that there is a certain way,
Of
there is a
course.
science behind it?
As you were talking, I thought of something very simple. Are you better now after talking to all of these people?
Yeah.
Or is it still the same problem for years, meaning you need another another party in the situation?
I see. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, what is the cause of mental health challenge in a person? Is it we discuss genes?
Yeah.
But can it be there are, like, I've seen perfectly happy. Well, no one can be perfectly happy, frankly speaking, but people who seem to be very normal, who suddenly have, this, and we saw this very much during COVID as well. That could be a trigger, that could be a reason, but you do see people who've had more or less productive, fruitful lives, and they've gone through their responsibilities, parents, father, brother, sister, and then suddenly they become this other kind of a person who's going through so much of trauma.
Yeah.
What could be the reason for that?
There are many reasons.
Okay.
It could be, for example, something terrible that happened to them early in life. People have quite frankly, very impressive coping facilities. They could be really very happy, experience something incredibly traumatic, or maybe perhaps childhood experiences with parents, with people around them that perhaps did harm them. You know, it starts in childhood. It could be, for example, shall we say, a breakup of an important relationship, or a predisposition, as we said. I don't know about the exact gene, but it could be a predisposition from just their environment.
Mm-hmm. So therefore, it's actually very important for parents to ensure that the children have happy childhoods, right?
Yeah, you can't always be completely happy.
You can't be,
You will
yes,
make
but
mistakes.
yes,
As
you
a
make
parent, you
mistakes,
will
I'm sure,
100%.
I'm sure.
And it's hard for parents to always blame because they have whatever tools.
I know.
But
yes.
to at least acknowledge, and at least when you see something that looks really difficult or the child is suffering, seek help.
Yes.
Don't try to do it yourself,
Yeah, it's always good to seek help.
Yeah.
So I think we need to take a short break, and
Okay.
then we'll come back.
Thank you.
welcome back after the break. We are speaking to Dr. Fejer Al-Majid, and we are in New Dawn Therapy, which is the place where she meets her patient and she consults and she talks to them. Dr. Fejer, I mean, this is something which I've thought about, given it a little bit of, I've thought about it often, which is that in the past, when psychiatry had not developed as a science, these issues must have been present. Right? How did people deal with it? Is it, you said that every person at some point of their lives would have had mental health issues. And I too believe in that, I've seen it in my own life, I've seen it in people around me. But how do you think that in the past, like now that we label people, there were people who were dealing with these before, and there were no medicines, there was no therapy, right?
That's very interesting. I think I mentioned sort of that some people may go on to live trouble-free lives.
Yeah.
What I meant by people may have mental health problems at some point, but we all go through challenges.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is very interesting. I think before, there are many different ways people dealt with it, but they did have a stronger sense of community. This idea of being held, this idea of belonging to a collective, to something bigger, is essential to our health. Also, I believe we discussed this, they weren't pathologized. They were seen to be different. They were seen to be maybe perhaps something's up with it. And it also depends on your location.
Where you are,
where
which
you
culture
are.
you
Some
belong
people
to.
would get scared of people.
Okay.
Some people would welcome them, as we said, with a gift. But I think the community was pretty major. I mean, when you look at Islamic old hospitals, and they used to put their hospitals in the middle of the city because they would enable their patients to be visited by their families. And when they left the hospital, they would give them money so that they would be able to do something with their lives.
Yeah.
And this is very old times.
Yeah.
So it's quite beautiful. It wasn't always the chaos that we see. I mean, some perhaps different hospitals, I'm sorry to say, they did chain their patients.
Yeah.
So it's location dependent.
It depends on where you are. Now, why is mental health, do you think it still continues to be a very taboo subject in the East? And by the East, I mean just not the Middle East. I also mean South Asia, from where I come from.
There's been quite an explosion in the health and wellness field recently.
Yeah, in recent, like 10
oh
years
my
or so,
goodness.
right?
Yeah, the younger generation are sort of like, we have issues, we're going to deal with them. And there's this whole issue of therapy speak. We get that with younger clients.
What's that?
Therapy speak, it's like every single thing is analyzed and identified and labeled. And I think that shows great emotional awareness, but it's quite difficult sometimes to just be when you're trying to categorize every single thing that you're feeling. Or, for example, I've seen this in the media recently of, they're a narcissist, or, oh, I'm feeling quite dissociated right now, or, oh, I'm being very OCD about this, or I think I have ADHD. Using this language so loosely,
words, right?
And sort of giving yourself 5 million diagnoses can be very
harmful
and also reductive and making you not experience.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think social media has had its share of responsibility for
it
a lot of
does,
issues, right?
It does, although I really enjoy social media.
Yeah, me too.
It's addictive, but
it is, yeah.
But you do learn a lot sometimes.
Yeah, you do learn a lot. But I was just thinking that when we were like growing up and we didn't have social media, which you won't know Anis because he's very young. So, but there was a time before and after. There was a time like dinosaurs like us. But we had perfectly good childhoods,
Yeah.
I can't remember missing out on Facebook and
No,
Instagram
no.
and things like that. And we were far more grounded.
Yes.
The sense of community was
The
more
community,
there, right?
and
Now we are like, a lot of isolation has come in despite social media.
that's very
It's
true.
Ironic, right?
You actually talk to people.
Yeah.
You don't have your face on in a phone.
You don't send them a WhatsApp
No,
message.
and you ride bikes, you go out, video
Yeah.
games. Okay, we're there, but not the major thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, I suppose, has had a huge impact on people and people's lives. Now, as a layperson, one feels that mental health has come a long way in Kuwait, but it's still taboo, and there is a lot more to be done in the field of psychiatry in terms of services and treatment. Do you think that's right?
I think you just have to know where to go.
Okay.
I work with very talented psychiatrists, and I trust the people I refer to. I trust them otherwise I wouldn't refer to them.
Yeah.
So you just have to know where to go. There are people in the mental health hospitals that are doing a brilliant job.
Okay.
It's just, unfortunately, you've got some people that ruin it for the rest. Some people, you know, and I think we have to be very careful as well, because it can be a bit of a minefield sometimes, because you're not just working with the patient, you're working with their family, with the society, with the beliefs, with, you know, being belonging and not belonging, and how that's going to impact even their marriage and their future. It's very difficult. I think Middle East, it has a very difficult time of it. If it was just patients and how they were feeling, I think we would do really well. But because we have so many factors involved,
Yeah, I think it's the East.
it's a minefield.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
hard.
It is.
But you've got these gold gems of doctors and therapists that you know you
Yeah.
can trust.
Yeah, I know. So what is psychiatric rehabilitation? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, when I wrote psychiatric rehabilitation, it can have different meanings, but what I feel is that when people are diagnosed and then they're sort of told, you know, get back to your life. Okay, I've just been diagnosed. You've given me the meds. I mean, when the patient says that, for example, what do I do? You know, sometimes there's no guidance. Like, how are you going to handle this diagnosis?
Yeah.
What does it mean to you? Is it really a diagnostic term that you identify with? How are you going to live your life? How are you going to be okay with your friends or make new friends? Or
That's right.
It's just very little guidance
That's right, very little
after.
guidance.
So when I wrote psychiatric rehabilitation, it is an actual thing, by the way, but what I mean by it is, how do I rehabilitate and help that person integrate their experience into their life after
I
being
never
diagnosed?
thought about this, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
when you lose a leg or a hand or whatever,
Exactly.
you stay in a hospital for so many months, and then you are out, and then you know you go through the whole process. But when it comes to mental health, you see a doctor, you're diagnosed, you're given tablets, now get on with your life.
Yeah,
you know?
it's a transition.
Yeah, it is definitely, yeah.
Can be very traumatizing.
It can be very
Yeah.
traumatizing, and there are no guidelines.
No,
Yeah,
not
I don't know
typically.
whether it's there in the West, but
They have
definitely.
occupational therapists, they have
Okay.
things like that, but I think it's important to have an integrated mental health system.
Yeah.
And I think we're working towards that right now.
Okay, that's great to know.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that I personally have given it a lot of thought, because I feel that a lot of later mental health problems is connected to what is not just happening at home, but what's happening in schools.
Yes.
So how important is it for parents to teach their children kindness and empathy? Because I think the seeds of mental health problems are sometimes connected to bullying in school children, or even bullying at home.
That's an excellent question, because I think that kindness and empathy may not be enough. Because, as you know, sometimes the school ground can get quite vicious.
Yeah.
I think boundary setting,
Yeah.
standing up for yourself. Because we would normally say be kind and empathetic, but when a kid punches another kid,
Yeah.
it's hard.
It is.
And does it prepare them for the real world?
No, it
I think
doesn't.
it's important to sort of show kids how to be firm in their boundaries. Number one, you can be kind, you can be empathetic, but no means no, and no, you don't get to do that.
And I've seen, and I don't know what is the reason for it, but that fact that kids have become a lot more vicious, you know, than in the past. You know, I mean, with their talk, perhaps, with the way they approach friendship, with the way they approach certain people, that it was not like that before. Maybe again the sense of community. I don't know.
I wouldn't know about that, but they have become very emotionally aware. Like, I've worked with children here before, and quite frankly, the level of intelligence is astonishing, and the way they talk about their feelings.
Okay.
I don't know if we were always like that, but what I'm noticing is a huge level of awareness. I think it's the kind of media that's consumed.
Okay.
Parents are much more, they talk about feelings perhaps a lot more.
Yeah. Okay. So, but do you, as a doctor, do you feel that mental health issues can be resolved fully, or is it like diabetes? It can just.
It's
be
an excellent
managed?
question. A very good question. I feel like if we look at them not as a problem to be solved, but maybe as an experience that we integrate and live with, that helps more. Because if it's a problem, then sometimes you're going to get anxious.
Okay.
Sometimes you're going to get triggered. But if I make it into an experience, if I make it into a story, if I integrate it, then I can live with it. Today I'm feeling a little bit wobbly. That's okay. Tomorrow I'm feeling a little bit more firm. That's okay. So you leave room for the depth and range of experience rather than I'm fixed or I'm sick.
I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That gives a lot of leverage, right? Yeah. A lot of place to expand. So there are some new age treatments that have now come up, and one of the things that I read about recently is magnetic stimulation therapy for severe depression.
Interesting. Yeah.
Have you heard of this?
I have heard of this. However,
Okay.
I do not feel that I've read enough about it to be able to
Okay.
comment on it.
Yeah.
And I don't know about the word new age
Okay.
because that can bring a lot different connotations.
Okay.
But I have heard about it. There are people who are more perhaps knowledgeable about it than I
Okay,
am.
but you did mention to me that you were now exploring indigenous and tribal
Yes.
way
Yes.
of therapy, of language,
Of
tribal
therapy
way? Of
and
therapy.
handling
Yeah.
mental health
How
issues.
what do
Oh,
you
this
mean
is
by that?
you're gonna get me started now, Chaitali. I've been reading about this a lot. I think it's the way people use visualization, myths, imagery, dreams, and these aren't necessarily just tribal. I mean, Carl Jung talked about it. Freud talked about dreams. But Carl Jung especially talks about symbols and their meanings and their archetypes and how they affect us inside. And if you look at different religions and you look at the symbols of different religions, they do affect us. They affect us on an emotional and spiritual level. So surely that means that they must have an important part to play in mental health treatment.
Okay.
You know, when you look at, for example, a crescent, you feel something. When you look at a crucifix, you feel something.
Okay.
So these images are powerful, and people are now, or have been for a while, utilizing them in treatment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's more of a kind of spiritual thing, a spiritual
It's spiritual, and it's also finding evidence in it.
upliftment.
Yeah.
Okay. Evidence is how was COVID, Dr. Fejer? I mean, how bad an influence did COVID have on mental health? But now that you are treating patients, do you think that I remember that when I was writing during that time, and there were some people who were saying that 10 to 15% of people will never recover mentally. Do you agree with that?
I would have to say it had a mixed effect.
Okay.
Right? It had, of course, a very isolating effect on some people. It had an effect where people, their routine was disrupted. They no longer had their activities. Other people, it brought them deeper into themselves. Other people found that there was perhaps a different life that they wanted.
Okay.
That a different life balance, working from home. So I think COVID had a mixed effect, but it really did remind us of what we found important in our lives.
But do you think that the effect that some people, for example, I personally know of some people who haven't yet recovered.
Yes,
I mean, who are still going through the. I don't know whether it was that or whether it was something underlying which kind of came to the surface.
Yes.
During that time
Yes.
of isolation, and I think perhaps. Even in mental health cases that I've seen otherwise, isolation is a huge
100%.
kind of, right?
100%.
Yeah.
It's one of the things we look for when a person starts to feel unwell. They start to isolate.
Okay.
They start to become more withdrawn, especially if, it's noticeable. And I think that withdrawal and isolation sometimes can be natural, but other times if it's prolonged or if the person is visibly uncomfortable, then that's something that we could perhaps look to,
Okay.
Yeah.
I have worked with children in certain areas, and I've seen amongst these children there are some who kind of have no friends.
Yeah.
And it is so difficult for them to either, maybe they don't have an attractive, either it's the personality or whether there is this thing amongst kids now that you want to be with the cool people.
Yeah.
You don't want to be seen with the uncool people, and that creates a lot of impact on these young people,
of course.
who don't have friends. What would you say to people like that? I mean, who find it difficult to make friends,
Well, I think you can do different things. Obviously, have a chat to them, sit with them and see, for example, what's going on. Is it something from home that they've not really learned how to socialize? Because, some family homes, they don't teach their children how to socialize. They may not have brothers or sisters. They come into the playground, as we said, with not the skill set, or maybe perhaps the school is unsuitable. Because some schools, for example, have different cultures. You've got some schools with specific religious viewpoints, some schools that aren't, some schools that perhaps get more bullying because of different
there are
factors.
I know. I had a personal, what should I say, an experience where I remember approaching, there was someone I knew who was getting severely bullied at school. So then I approached the principal of the school and I said that this is not right, this should stop. And the principal looked at me and said, that it's important for the child to be strong.
Oh my goodness.
So I thought that was such a negative
It's horrible.
attitude, response to what I said, that instead
Yeah.
of taking stock of the situation and, creating a more positive, a place where the child could feel more at home.
Yeah.
Instead of that, you isolate the child and you say that, it's the child who's being persecuted, who's being bullied. You're saying
Yeah.
that you have to make him or her more strong.
That's
I
horrible.
think that's important for schools also to
Of
take into
course,
account,
there
right?
needs to be support. There needs to be a system protecting the child.
Yeah, looking back at your journey, which is fairly new, you're very young.
Thank you.
And how do you see the way forward for yourself here?
That's a very good question. I think I'm always exploring, to be honest.
Okay.
And I'm always learning every day. And if you talked to me about 5 years ago, I probably would have given you a different interview.
Okay.
So I think for me, the way forward is just to keep learning, exploring, and being as authentic as possible, which isn't easy sometimes, and always acting as ethically as I can, but never perhaps surrendering my belief system about how this new dawn should be a safe space for everyone,
Yeah.
to always believe in hope and to always believe that there is a way.
How do you, why, that's another question I want to ask you, because this is, again, something which has troubled me. Why is mental health treatment so expensive in Kuwait?
This is a very good question, and I think we discussed it a little bit. I don't know.
Okay.
I think sometimes when you look at certain marketing strategies, people put their prices up. Sometimes expenses do go up and people put their prices up. Sometimes, as doctors and therapists, we have put a lot of money in our education, a lot of years. And I feel some people maybe put their prices up because I worked hard to get there. My services should be of value.
Okay.
However, you got the flip side of that where people need access.
Yeah.
So I see both sides. We try to keep our rates accessible at New Dawn Therapy, but sometimes it's not easy because we live in a life where obviously it's sometimes business.
It is business, and there are certain, I don't know to what extent mental health facilities are available for expats here. I haven't explored that, but I think there is a difference, right? That a lot of people I've seen, if they have mental health issues, they go back to the country where they come from and they seek help there,
But that's hard though, because you need a continual source.
Okay.
I mean, online is great for that, though you have to be careful of licensing.
Okay.
But I think I believe in online.
Yeah,
personally.
you do.
I do believe in online.
It works?
It does work.
Okay.
For example, I have mentors. I have people I learn from online, and it's very valuable. If it was in person, that would be even better. But online, perhaps, I think is the way forward.
If you don't have the option, you can opt for online.
Yeah, and sometimes it's nice because it's also flexible. Like when I talk to my coaches and mentors as a business owner, it's very flexible. And that really helps when you have a very busy time being a therapist and handling your own business. Yeah.
We mentioned before we started recording, I mentioned energy healing too, right? I mean, I've been hearing so many things that, it's good to, it works and it does wonders, but does it really
I'm
work?
laughing because that's the part of me that grew up in a medical training center where when we hear energy, we're like, oh my goodness, that's so new age. But having recently gotten into meditation and yoga in a serious way, I went and did a yoga teacher training in Bali. It's changed my life. Meditating on a regular basis, doing yoga, bringing yourself back into the body, bringing yourself back into yourself. What happens sometimes is that you can leave the body when you're traumatized, leave the body when you're feeling unsafe. And bringing yourself, grounding yourself to the ground, this makes you feel more present. And it can really help with, for example, anxiety, depression, regulation of mood. It can be a transformative experience. Meditation and yoga.
Yeah. Both of them. I see. Okay. Now that's something I've been trying to perhaps start for a long time, and I think it is. And the best thing about yoga is you can do it at any age.
You can do it at
any level of flexibility, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just the flexibility of, for example, putting your leg behind your ear. That's what people think usually. Yeah. Like, I have to be able to do that funky pose. It's more the breathing and the movement and just feeling it.
And slowing things down.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, we are like so much in a rush throughout
We're
the day.
always, it's purposeful
Yes.
and intentional.
Yeah, yes,
Mindful.
okay. So I hope that people who are listening, you can also do yoga online if you're not
Yes,
sure, right?
of course.
Yeah, so do opt for it. Now, how important is it for practitioners in the field of mental health to raise awareness? I mean, I know that you put in a lot of efforts.
Yes, I do.
Tell us about that.
Raising awareness of mental health.
Yeah.
I do put in a lot of effort, and I also do it in English and Arabic, and it's interesting because sometimes different languages put you in different positions.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that as I said to me, one of my main passions is giving people options, giving people different ways of thinking about things and different ways to access help.
Okay.
Because when you tell people, this is what you need to do, this is your only option, otherwise you have nothing else. I think that's really limiting and can put people in a corner. However, when you educate them, give them stories, give them something they can relate to, give them ideas, this makes them better able to accept ways of dealing with things in a better or perhaps more healthy way for them.
A more healthier way, okay.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. So I think we've come almost to the end of our show.
Yeah.
But we cannot let you go, Dr. Fejer, without answering our quick five section.
Okay.
Where we try to, so we've had a very serious discussion here, and now we will try to, what's the word to use? The new age
The
word.
new age.
Chill. So what would be your best mood lifter?
Music.
Music, huh? Your one bad habit?
Oh, biscuits.
Biscuits. Something, that's the first one for me. I think we haven't heard that before, biscuits. Something you would rather forget.
It's a very good question. Histology.
What's that?
The study of cells.
The study of cells, huh?
It was useful, but I
Yeah,
have so
can
many other
imagine.
interests.
I can just, imagine. What annoys you?
I never really think about these things.
Yeah.
What annoys me is...
So many things annoy me.
Yeah.
So many things.
What annoys
I have a
me
whole list of them.
is, I guess, I actually don't have an answer.
Really?
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, a lot of things annoy me. I think
Yeah.
sometimes people who don't want to look at other points of view.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's a good one. The one mantra that never fails you.
It is never too late to start over.
Yeah, it's never too late to start over. On that note of hope, thank you very much, Dr. Fejer
Thank
Al-Majid,
you.
for being on the guest show. It was really, I'm so happy that we were able to
Aw,
do
thank
this,
you.
learn so much from you, and I
you.
hope that people who are listening in will be benefited, from what we've discussed today.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You are listening to the guest show on Radio Kuwait. The show is scripted and presented by Chaitali B. Roy and directed by Anis Bakar.